A mousy librarian named Emma Lawson stood mortified in the grand lobby of Meridian Trust Bank, coffee dripping from her worn cardigan as Victoria Bennett's perfectly manicured hand accidentally knocked over her cup. Cruel snickers echoed through the marble hall until a sleek black Tesla pulled up outside, and Alexander Morgan, Boston's most elusive tech billionaire, strode through the doors. No one knew that this unassuming woman was his wife, or that by closing time, the deed to the entire building would bear his name. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The magnificent glass doors of Meridian Trust Bank, an imposing structure of marble and brass that stood like a temple of wealth in downtown Boston, swung open as Emma Lawson hurried in from the rain. Her sensible shoes squeaked against the polished floor, drawing annoyed glances from the immaculately dressed bank employees who valued presentation above all else. Emma's rain-speckled glasses slid down her nose as she fumbled with her worn leather messenger bag, searching for the documents she needed. "May I help you?" asked Zoe Parker, the teller with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. She appraised Emma's appearance with a quick, dismissive glance, taking in the second-hand cardigan, the practical loafers, and the lack of designer accessories that were practically uniform among their usual clientele. "Yes, please. I need to discuss a small business loan application I submitted last week," Emma replied, her voice soft but clear. "I was told it would be processed by today." Zoe's smile tightened. "And your name?" "Emma Lawson. I'm looking to expand the community library program I started in Cambridge," she explained, pushing her glasses back up. Emma had dedicated the past 5 years to creating accessible reading spaces in underserved neighborhoods, operating on minimal funding and maximum passion. "Have a seat." Zoe gestured to a leather bench near the waiting area. "Someone will be with you eventually." The slight pause was deliberate, a small cruelty that Emma pretended not to notice. The bank's interior was intimidating by design: soaring ceilings with hand-painted Renaissance-inspired murals, marble columns that seemed to judge anyone who couldn't afford a 7-figure investment portfolio, and hushed conversations about wealth acquisition that made Emma's modest loan request seem almost laughable in comparison. Emma sat patiently, arranging her paperwork, meticulous projections, community impact assessments, and testimonials from children whose lives had been changed by her mobile libraries. Her work was her pride, separate from everything else in her life by deliberate choice. She believed in earning her own way, in proving her worth through dedication rather than connections. After 40 minutes, though other clients had come and gone in half that time, Victoria Bennett finally emerged from her office. The loan officer's crimson-soled heels announced her approach before she appeared, her sleek bob swinging as she surveyed the waiting area with an expression of practiced indifference. "Ms. Lawson," she called, making no effort to approach Emma. "Directly. This way." Emma gathered her materials and followed Victoria down a hallway of offices where financial advisors cultivated the fortunes of Boston's elite. She couldn't help noticing how Victoria's smile transformed when she nodded to a man in an expensive suit, becoming genuine and warm before freezing over again as she turned back to Emma. Victoria's office was a shrine to success: awards for top performance, photos with minor celebrities, and a view of the harbor that people paid premium rents to enjoy. She gestured for Emma to sit in a chair that was deliberately lower than her own desk chair, a subtle power play that Emma recognized but didn't challenge. "So," Victoria began, barely glancing at the file on her desk, "you want Meridian Trust to finance your library project." She made it sound like a child's school assignment rather than Emma's professional passion. Yes, we've seen tremendous success with our initial programs, Emma explained, leaning forward earnestly. Reading scores have improved by 23% in participating schools, and we've had requests from 3 additional neighborhoods. The expansion would allow us to— I'll stop you right there, Victoria interrupted, finally looking up. Her eyes narrowed as she took in Emma's rain-frizzed hair and the small coffee stain on her sleeve. Meridian Trust has certain standards for its investments. We focus on ventures with substantial returns. Emma nodded, prepared for this. The financial projections are on page 4. With the grant funding we've secured and the subscription model for supplemental educational programs, we project a sustainable operation within 18 months. Victoria flipped to the page with manicured fingers, making a show of scanning it before setting it aside with a dismissive flick. These numbers are optimistic, and your personal financial profile doesn't inspire confidence. The meeting continued this way for 20 painful minutes, Emma presenting thoughtful plans and Victoria dismantling them with barely concealed disdain. When Thomas Wilson, the bank manager, knocked and entered without waiting, Emma sensed it was a choreographed interruption. "Victoria, do you have the Reynolds portfolio ready for—" Thomas paused, noticing Emma. His eyebrows rose slightly. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Just wrapping up," Victoria smiled. "Ms. Lawson was discussing a small community project." Thomas's eyes swept over Emma with the clinical assessment of someone determining a person's net worth at a glance. Whatever calculation he made left him unimpressed. "Ah, well, when you're finished, the Reynolds file needs immediate attention. They're considering a significant investment." "Of course," Victoria nodded, the message clear. Emma's business wasn't worth prioritizing. After Thomas left, Victoria closed Emma's file with finality. "I don't think Meridian Trust is the right fit for your needs. Perhaps a credit union or community bank would be more appropriate for a venture of this scale." She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Emma gathered her documents, maintaining her composure. "Thank you for your time," she said quietly, refusing to show how the dismissal stung. As she turned to leave, Victoria added a parting shot. "And Ms. Lawson? For future reference, most professionals dress appropriately when seeking financial partnerships." She smiled, the cruelty wrapped in a veneer of helpful advice. Emma's cheeks burned, but she nodded and exited the office with her head high. In the hallway, she nearly collided with Aidan Clark, a financial advisor known for his CNBC appearances and aggressive investment strategies. His custom-tailored suit probably cost more than 6 months of Emma's rent. "Excuse me," she murmured, stepping aside. Aidan's lip curled slightly. "No problem," he said, then added in a stage whisper to his colleague as Emma passed, "Victoria's charity cases are getting more pathetic by the week." The comment wasn't meant to be overheard, but the marble hallway carried sound perfectly. Emma's steps faltered momentarily, but she continued toward the lobby, clutching her portfolio tighter. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. In the main lobby, Emma stopped at the coffee station to collect herself before heading back into the rain. As she poured a cup with slightly trembling hands, she overheard Zoe speaking to another teller behind the counter. "That's the 3rd one this month Victoria's had to turn away," Zoe said, not bothering to lower her voice. "I don't know why they even try here. There should be a sign, 'No dreamers without collateral.'" The other teller laughed. "Did you see her shoes? My grandmother has the same pair." Emma stirred her coffee slowly, taking a deep breath. Their words shouldn't matter. She knew her work had value, regardless of her appearance or bank account. She turned to leave when Victoria emerged from the hallway with Thomas and Aidan in tow, the 3 of them moving toward a well-dressed couple being escorted in through the bank's private client entrance. Victoria spotted Emma lingering by the coffee station and frowned. She altered her course slightly to pass by, Thomas and Aidan following. As Victoria passed, her arm extended just enough to knock into Emma's elbow, sending the coffee splashing across Emma's cardigan and portfolio. "Oh!" Victoria's hand flew to her mouth in mock horror. "I'm so sorry." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I didn't see you there," Emma gasped as the hot liquid soaked through to her skin. She set down the now empty cup and reached for napkins, her face flushing with embarrassment as nearby clients turned to stare. "No harm done," Emma managed, dabbing ineffectively at the spreading stain. "You might want to take care of that before it sets," Thomas suggested, with false concern, making no move to help. "Coffee stains are terribly persistent on whatever fabric that is." Aidan snickered, not bothering to hide his amusement. "At least it blends with the interesting pattern." "Here," Zoe approached, holding out more napkins with a smirk poorly disguised as sympathy. Though honestly, it might be an improvement. Emma accepted the napkins, acutely aware of the growing audience. A few clients had paused their transactions to watch the spectacle, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with the same dismissive amusement as the bank employees. No one stepped forward to help. Victoria checked her watch with theatrical concern. "Well, we shouldn't keep the Blackwoods waiting. They're considering moving their entire portfolio to us." She turned to Emma with a plastic smile. "Best of luck with your library thing." As the trio walked away, their laughter drifted back to Emma, who stood clutching soggy napkins to her ruined cardigan. Her carefully prepared documents were stained and wrinkled, much like her dignity. For a moment, she considered walking out, swallowing the humiliation, and never returning. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and moved to a corner of the lobby to salvage what she could of her portfolio. As she carefully separated the damp pages, she pulled out her phone, hesitating only briefly before making a call. It rang twice before a warm, deep voice answered. "Em, everything okay? You never called during the day." Alexander Morgan's concern was immediate, cutting through his busy schedule the moment he heard her voice. "Not really," Emma admitted quietly, her voice steady despite everything. "I'm at Meridian Trust and it's been difficult." There was a brief silence on the line. "Difficult how?" The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable, a hardening around the edges that few people ever heard from the normally affable tech innovator. "The usual," Emma sighed, not wanting to elaborate in the echoing lobby. "But worse. My application was basically laughed out of the room, and then there was an incident with coffee." "Are you hurt?" Alex's voice was tight. "No, just wet and embarrassed," Emma assured him. "But Alex, these people, the way they treat anyone, they think isn't worth their time. It's not right." Another pause, longer this time. Emma could almost hear the wheels turning in her husband's brilliant mind. "Where exactly in the bank are you?" "Main lobby. East. Corner," she replied, confused by the question. "Stay there," Alex said, his decision made. "I'm 3 minutes away." "Alex, you don't need to," Emma began, but the call had already ended. She put her phone away, confused and slightly anxious. In their 5 years of marriage, she'd been adamant about handling her professional life independently. Alexander Morgan was a force of nature in the tech world, his software company revolutionizing data security after he'd built it from a dorm room project into a billion-dollar enterprise. But Emma had insisted on making her own way with her literacy nonprofit, using her maiden name professionally and never leveraging her husband's considerable influence. It wasn't shame. She was immensely proud of Alex and the good his wealth allowed them to do quietly through anonymous donations. It was principle, Emma believed in earning respect through merit, not marriage, and she'd been determined that her community libraries succeed or fail based on their own value. Now, standing in the corner of Meridian Trust with coffee seeping through her cardigan and the muffled laughter of Victoria and her colleagues drifting from across the lobby, Emma wondered if principles were worth this kind of humiliation. Before she could reconsider her call to Alex, the bank's massive front doors swung open and a hush fell over the lobby. Alexander Morgan stood framed in the doorway, rain glistening on his wool coat, his presence commanding attention without effort. At 6'2", with dark hair touched by silver at the temples and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. Emma watched as recognition rippled through the bank. Alexander Morgan was notoriously private. Few photos of him appeared in the press, despite his company's prominence. But in Boston's financial circles, he was instantly recognizable. A whisper started near the entrance and spread like wildfire across the marble floor. Victoria was the first to react, smoothly detaching herself from her clients and gliding toward Alex with a practiced smile. "Mr. Morgan, what an unexpected honor. I'm Victoria Bennett, Senior Loan Officer. How can Meridian Trust assist you today?" Alex barely glanced at her, his eyes scanning the lobby until they locked with Emma's. The warm smile that spread across his face was for her alone, and it transformed his serious demeanor entirely. Without acknowledging Victoria, he crossed the lobby directly to Emma. "There you are," he said softly, taking in her damp cardigan and the coffee-stained portfolio. His expression darkened momentarily before he gently took the ruined documents from her hands. "Rough meeting." Emma nodded, suddenly aware of the absolute silence that had fallen over the bank. Every eye was on them, including Victoria's, who had followed Alex across the lobby with mounting confusion. Thomas and Aidan had emerged from whatever corner they'd been occupying, drawn by the commotion. "Mr. Morgan," Victoria tried again, her voice honeyed with confusion. "If you're interested in our wealth management services, I'd be happy to introduce you to our premier team. We have several options that would be suitable for someone of your position." Alex turned slowly, regarding Victoria as if just noticing her presence. "You are?" Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Victoria Bennett, Senior Loan Officer. We just met with..." Her eyes darted to Emma, pieces clicking into place with visible confusion. "My wife," Alex supplied, his arms sliding protectively around Emma's shoulders. "Emma Morgan, though professionally she uses Lawson." The bombshell detonated in slow motion across the lobby. Victoria's perfect composure cracked, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Behind her, Thomas froze mid-step, and Aidan's smug expression dissolved into naked panic. Zoe dropped the stack of forms she'd been holding, papers scattering across the polished floor. "You're..." Victoria managed finally, her eyes darting between them in disbelief. "Wife," Alex repeated pleasantly, though there was steel beneath the smile. "For 5 wonderful years now. Emma was just telling me about her experience applying for a business loan here. Something about it not meeting your standards." Thomas stepped forward, shouldering past a shell-shocked Victoria. "Mr. Morgan, I'm Thomas Wilson, branch manager. There must be some misunderstanding. If Mrs. Morgan would like to resubmit her application, I'd be happy to personally." "It's Ms. Lawson professionally," Emma corrected quietly. "And there's no misunderstanding. My application was very thoroughly rejected." She looked directly at Victoria. "Apparently, my numbers are optimistic, and my personal financial profile doesn't inspire confidence." The color drained from Victoria's face. I didn't know that she's married to me," Alex finished, his voice dangerously soft. "Why should that matter? Isn't a business plan evaluated on its own merits? Aidan stepped forward, straightening his tie nervously. Absolutely, Mr. Morgan. Meridian Trust has always valued innovation and community impact. Perhaps if Ms. Lawson would like to reschedule, that won't be necessary. Alex cut him off, his gaze sweeping the 3 bank employees. Emma makes her own decisions about her business. I'm just here because my wife called, upset after being deliberately humiliated. He looked pointedly at Emma's stained cardigan. Victoria blanched. The coffee was an accident. Was it? Alex asked mildly. Like the comment about her shoes being like your grandmother's. He turned to Zoe, who had been inching toward the back office, or perhaps like suggesting the stain might improve her cardigan. Emma touched his arm gently. Alex. He covered her hand with his expression softening for her before hardening again as he addressed the growing crowd of bank employees and curious clients. You know what's interesting about Meridian Trust? Its parent company has been looking for a buyer for months. Not common knowledge, but true. The holding group has been quietly shopping it around to select investors. Thomas blinked rapidly, clearly blindsided by this information. I wasn't aware of any pending sale. No, you wouldn't be, Alex agreed. It's been kept very quiet to prevent exactly the kind of panic that tanks share prices. But as of, he checked his watch, 43 minutes ago, Morgan Innovations officially acquired controlling interest in Meridian Financial Group. The silence in the lobby deepened to something almost physical. Emma looked up at her husband in surprise. This was news to her as well. Alex had mentioned considering some banking acquisitions over breakfast last month, but nothing definite. Technically, the paperwork won't be final until tomorrow, Alex continued conversationally, but I think we can consider this branch's management structure as already under review, don't you? Thomas's face had gone the color of old paper. Mr. Morgan, if there's been any misunderstanding... Oh, I understand perfectly, Alex replied. I understand that my wife, who has a master's degree in library science, has raised over $2 million for literacy programs and has improved reading scores across 5 school districts, was judged not on her excellent business plan, but on her cardigan and sensible shoes. Victoria's professional mask had completely crumbled. Sir, please, my position here is being re-evaluated, Alex finished for her, along with the positions of anyone else who thinks mockery and deliberate humiliation are acceptable ways to treat loan applicants, or any human being for that matter. Emma squeezed Alex's hand, a silent communication passing between them. She had never used their marriage for advantage, but neither could she deny the cold satisfaction of seeing these people face consequences for their cruelty. Not just to her, but to everyone they had likely treated the same way. Alex, Emma said softly, I think they understand. He studied her face, then nodded slightly. You're right, this isn't the place. He turned back to the stunned trio. Miss Bennett, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Clark, the incoming management team will contact you tomorrow regarding transition procedures. Until then, consider yourselves on administrative leave. Thomas stepped forward, desperation clear on his face. Mr. Morgan, please, I have a family, a mortgage. So do many people who've been humiliated in this bank, Alex replied evenly. People whose dreams were dismissed because they didn't wear the right clothes or carry the right handbag. That ends now. He looked around the lobby at the other employees who were watching in stunned silence. Meridian Trust is about to undergo a significant culture change. Those who believe in treating all clients with dignity will thrive. Those who don't should update their resumes. With that, he turned to Emma, his voice softening. Ready to go? Emma nodded, gathering her damaged portfolio. As they turned to leave, she paused and looked back at Victoria, whose perfect composure had dissolved into barely controlled panic. For the record, Emma said quietly, My cardigan is handmade by artisans in Peru who are paid fair wages through a women's cooperative that my first mobile library program helped establish. She smiled slightly. And yes, I could afford designer labels. I choose not to. Alex gently guided her toward the door, past the rows of stunned faces. Just before they reached the exit, Zoe stepped forward hesitantly. Ms. Lawson, Mrs. Morgan, I'm sorry for what I said, for not helping. Her apology trailed off as she realized there was no easy fix for months of casual cruelty. Emma regarded her thoughtfully. Thank you for saying that. Perhaps there's hope for that culture change after all. As they stepped through the massive doors into the rainy Boston afternoon, Alex's driver hurried forward with an umbrella. Before they reached the car, Emma turned to her husband. Did you really buy the bank? She asked, a mix of exasperation and amazement in her voice. Alex's serious expression melted into a small, slightly mischievous smile. The acquisition has been in the works for weeks. Their security infrastructure needs a complete overhaul, and the integration possibilities with our financial software division are substantial. He helped her into the car before adding, but yes, I may have made a few calls to accelerate the timeline after you mentioned your meeting was today. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emma watched the imposing facade of Meridian Trust recede through the rain-streaked window. The institution that had seemed so intimidating just hours ago was now improbably partly hers. She turned to Alex, who was watching her with a mixture of concern and love. You know, I've always wanted to make it on my own, she said softly. And you have, he replied without hesitation. What happened today doesn't change that. Your programs work, Emma. They change lives. The only failure was the banks, in not recognizing the value right in front of them. Emma leaned against his shoulder, considering what happens to them, Victoria and the others. Alex's expression grew thoughtful. That depends partially on you. This is your area of expertise, after all. My expertise. Education, he clarified. Teaching people to do better, to be better. Maybe these bankers need to learn what you've been teaching those kids all along. That what matters isn't how someone looks or what they wear, but what they contribute. Emma considered this as the car navigated through Boston's rain-slicked streets. Perhaps there was a middle path between walking away and destroying careers, a path that actually created change rather than just satisfaction. I might have some ideas, she said finally. Alex smiled, unsurprised. It was, after all, one of the countless reasons he had fallen in love with the brilliant, compassionate woman beside him, her ability to see possibilities where others saw only problems. I thought you might. As the sleek car disappeared into the flow of traffic, the imposing edifice of Meridian Trust Bank stood unchanged against the Boston skyline. But inside, everything had already begun to shift, like the first tremors before an earthquake that would transform its foundation forever. The next morning dawned with a relentless downpour that turned Boston's financial district into a maze of black umbrellas and splashing taxis. Meridian Trust's marble lobby buzzed with nervous energy as employees huddled in whispered conversations, smartphones clutched in white-knuckled hands as they scrolled through financial news sites. Overnight, rumors of the Morgan acquisition had leaked, sending tremors through the city's banking community. Security guards stood at attention near the entrance, their presence unusual for a Tuesday morning. Precisely at 8:30 a.m., the elevator doors slid open, and a woman in a stylish but modest navy pantsuit stepped out. It took several heartbeats before anyone recognized Emma Lawson without her rain-soaked cardigan and flustered demeanor. Today, Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her glasses were replaced by subtle contacts, and she carried herself with quiet confidence that commanded attention without demanding it. Beside her walked Alexander Morgan, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the lobby. Behind them followed a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a severe bun. Olivia Chen, Morgan Innovations' formidable chief operating officer, carried a leather portfolio and walked with the purposeful stride of someone who had ended careers with a single meeting. The whispers intensified as the trio crossed the lobby toward the bank's main conference room. Victoria Bennett stood frozen behind the loan desk, her usual poise fractured by visible anxiety. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't conceal the shadows under her eyes from a sleepless night spent polishing her resume and making panicked calls to industry contacts, only to discover that Alexander Morgan's influence reached further than she had imagined. She straightened her blouse and attempted a smile that died before it reached her eyes. Thomas Wilson emerged from his office, his typically immaculate appearance showing subtle signs of distress. A slightly crooked tie, hair with less product than usual, a smile that resembled a grimace. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," he called, hurrying over with an outstretched hand. "We've prepared the executive conference room for your meeting." Alex ignored the offered hand. "Ms. Lawson, professionally," he corrected for the second time, "and we'll use the main conference room, the one with glass walls visible to the entire staff." Thomas blinked rapidly. "Of course, whatever you prefer. Should I gather the senior management team?" "Everyone," Emma said clearly. "Floor staff included." Thomas hesitated. "Everyone, but our tellers and loan officers have transactions scheduled. The bank will open late today," Olivia Chen interjected, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried the crisp precision of someone unaccustomed to repeating herself. "All employees are required at this meeting, no exceptions." Victoria took a tentative step forward. "Mr. Morgan, about yesterday. We'll address everything shortly," Alex cut her off, not unkindly, but with finality that brooked no argument. He gestured toward the conference room. "Shall we?" Within 15 minutes, Meridian Trust's 63 employees had assembled in and around the glass-walled conference room. Those who couldn't fit inside clustered in the doorway and hallway, straining to hear. At the head of the table sat Alex, with Emma and Olivia flanking him. The senior staff, including a visibly nervous Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan, occupied the nearest seats, while Zoe and other junior employees stood along the walls. "Good morning," Alex began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hushed room. "As you've likely heard, Morgan Innovations has acquired Meridian Financial Group, including this branch. Normally, I'd leave these announcements to our transition team, but given yesterday's events, I felt a personal touch was warranted." Eyes darted toward Emma, who sat straight-backed and calm, nothing like the flustered woman they'd mocked 24 hours earlier. "First," Alex continued, "let me introduce Olivia Chen, our COO, who will be overseeing the operational restructuring." He gestured to the stern-faced woman, who nodded once without smiling. "And of course," he added with a warm glance at Emma, "many of you met my wife yesterday, though perhaps not under ideal circumstances. Emma Lawson Morgan heads the Open Page initiative, which has brought literacy programs to underserved communities across Massachusetts. The loan she was seeking, and that was rejected rather dismissively, would have expanded those services to 5 additional neighborhoods." Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Alex's gaze settled on her briefly before moving on. "Let me be clear about something." Alex leaned forward, his voice hardening slightly. "I did not buy this bank because my wife was treated poorly, though that certainly accelerated my timeline. Meridian has been an acquisition target for months due to its strategic location and client base. What yesterday revealed, however, was a cultural problem that requires immediate attention. Thomas cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Morgan, I want to assure you that what happened was an isolated incident." "Was it?" Emma spoke for the first time, her question hanging in the air like crystal. "Because based on staff interviews conducted this morning by Ms. Chen's team, it seems that judgment based on appearance, income level, or social status is standard practice here." Olivia opened her portfolio and extracted several sheets of paper. "We have documented testimonials from 22 loan applicants who were rejected over the past year despite meeting all financial requirements. The common denominator, they didn't fit a certain profile of wealth or status that Meridian has unofficially prioritized." Murmurs rippled through the assembled employees. Some looked shocked, others guilty, a few defiant. "That's standard risk assessment," Aidan protested. Weakly. "We have profile metrics that somehow favor clients who wear designer labels and drive luxury cars, regardless of their actual creditworthiness." Olivia raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Mr. Clark, we reviewed your approval record. You rejected a pediatric nurse with perfect credit and substantial savings because, and I quote from your notes, presentation suggests financial instability." Aidan's face flushed dark red as heads turned in his direction. "Here's what's going to happen," Alex continued, his tone measured but firm. "Meridian Trust is undergoing a complete cultural reset, effective immediately. This branch will become a pilot for a new approach to community banking, one that evaluates clients based on merit, potential, and character, rather than appearance or connections." Emma opened her own portfolio, and the room shifted its attention to her. Gone was any trace of the woman they'd considered insignificant yesterday. In her place sat someone whose quiet authority commanded the room as effectively as her husband's more direct approach. "The Open Page Initiative will be partnering with Meridian on a 3-month rehabilitation program," she explained, her voice clear and confident. "Each of you will spend 1 day a week working with our community literacy volunteers in neighborhoods your loan policies have historically underserved." Victoria's perfectly manicured hand shot up, her expression incredulous. "We're being asked to volunteer in place of our regular duties?" "Not asked," Alex clarified. "Required at full salary. Consider it field research into the communities you're supposed to be serving." "Additionally," Emma continued as if there had been no interruption, "loan applications will now undergo blind initial review, names, addresses, and physical descriptions removed, with decisions based solely on financial qualifications and business viability." Thomas looked physically ill. "That's not how banking works. Client relationships are built on personal connections, which can continue after the initial qualification," Emma agreed. "But first impressions will no longer be determined by shoes or handbags." Olivia closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. "Now to personnel matters. Ms. Chen, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Clark, please remain after this meeting to discuss your individual situations with me. For everyone else, your positions are secure, provided you embrace these changes genuinely." Relief rippled visibly through the junior staff, though uncertainty lingered in many expressions. Zoe, who had been standing silently against the wall, slowly raised her hand. "Yes?" Emma acknowledged her with a nod. "What happens to clients who were unfairly rejected?" Zoe asked, her voice small but steady. "Like, hypothetically, if someone was turned down because they didn't seem important enough?" Emma smiled, the expression transforming her face. "An excellent question. Starting next week, we'll be conducting reviews of all rejections from the past year. Qualified applicants will be invited to resubmit with expedited processing." She paused, looking directly at Zoe. "And we'll need dedicated staff to handle that initiative. people who understand what needs to change and why. Zoe straightened slightly, a cautious hope replacing her earlier fear. Alex stood, signaling the end of the general meeting. That's all for now. Ms. Chen will provide detailed transition documents to department heads this afternoon. The bank will open at noon today. He surveyed the room, his expression serious. Meridian Trust is being given a rare opportunity to reinvent itself. Those who can adapt will find this an exciting place to work. Those who cannot should consider their options. As the employees filed out, their expressions ranging from shell-shocked to cautiously optimistic, Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan remained seated, their faces grim with the knowledge that their careers hung by threads they no longer controlled. When the room had cleared, except for the three senior staff members, Olivia, Emma, and Alex, a heavy silence descended. Victoria stared at her folded hands on the table. Her usual confidence evaporated. Thomas kept swallowing convulsively, his eyes darting between the three people who now controlled his professional fate. Aidan alone maintained a veneer of defiance, though it cracked visibly around the edges. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Alex said finally. "Yesterday, each of you participated in the humiliation of a woman you deemed unworthy of respect, based entirely on superficial judgments." "It wasn't personal," Victoria attempted, her voice lacking its usual polish. "We have standards for client interactions. It felt quite personal when you deliberately spilled coffee on me," Emma interrupted quietly. Victoria flinched. "That was an accident. We have the security footage," Olivia stated flatly, tapping her tablet, "along with audio of numerous inappropriate comments. Shall I play it?" Victoria's face drained of color. "That won't be necessary." Thomas leaned forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. "Mr. Morgan, we've all made mistakes, but I've given 15 years to this institution. My track record with high-value clients is impeccable. Surely that counts for something." "It does," Alex acknowledged, "which is why you're sitting here instead of receiving a termination notice. But your impeccable record came at the expense of countless qualified applicants who didn't match your narrow definition of value." Aidan, sensing the direction of the conversation, abruptly changed tactics. "Look, what happened yesterday was regrettable. We misjudged Ms. Lawson, and that was our mistake. But in banking, appearances matter. Clients expect a certain level of exclusivity." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Do they? Or is that the environment you've cultivated to justify treating people differently based on your personal biases?" Before Aidan could respond, the conference room door opened and a man in his 60s entered. Harold Blackwood, one of Boston's old money patriarchs and one of Meridian's highest value clients, nodded respectfully to Alex. "Morgan, sorry to interrupt. Your assistant said I might find you here." Alex stood to shake the older man's hand. "Harold, thanks for coming on short notice." Victoria and Thomas exchanged confused glances, while Aidan's expression turned calculating, clearly seeing a potential ally in the influential client. "Mr. Blackwood," Thomas began, rising from his seat, "always a pleasure to see our most valued client. I wasn't aware you had an appointment today." Harold Blackwood's steel-grey eyes flicked dismissively over Thomas before returning to Alex. "I don't. Alexander called this morning to discuss some changes happening at Meridian." His gaze settled on Emma with genuine warmth. "And to finally introduce me to his wife, whom I've heard so much about but never had the pleasure of meeting." Emma stood, extending her hand. "It's lovely to meet you, Mr. Blackwood. Alex mentions your foundation's work often." Harold, please," the older man insisted, clasping her hand in both of his. "Your husband has been instrumental in modernizing our grant distribution systems. The Blackwood Foundation has been able to help twice as many students because of It. He turned back to Alex. So, you finally bought the place. About time. The leadership here has been stagnant for years. Victoria made a small, strangled sound. Aidan, sensing an opportunity, smoothly interjected. Mr. Blackwood, I've personally overseen your portfolio for the past 3 years. I want to assure you that despite any ownership changes, your accounts will continue receiving our highest level of attention. Harold Blackwood turned slowly, fixing Aidan with a penetrating stare. You're Clark, aren't you? The one who rejected my grandson's application last month? Aidan blinked, momentarily confused. I don't recall. Jason Blackwood, Harold supplied, his tone hardening. 26, graduate of Northeastern. Came in wanting to start a mobile veterinary clinic for underserved neighborhoods. You told him, and I quote, perhaps a smaller, more community-oriented bank would be better suited to your unique venture. Alex and Emma exchanged surprised glances. This was an unexpected development. Aidan paled. Mr. Blackwood, if I had known he was your grandson, that's precisely the problem. Harold cut him off. You shouldn't have needed to know he was my grandson. His business plan was solid, his credentials impeccable. But he came in wearing jeans and driving a used Subaru because he believes in living within his means, and you dismissed him without even reading his proposal. Thomas hurriedly intervened. There must be some mistake. I'm sure if Jason reapplies, he already did, Harold stated flatly. At Boston Community Bank, they approved him on the spot. The clinic opens next month, no thanks to Meridian. He turned back to Alex. So when you called about cultural problems here, I wasn't the least bit surprised. Alex nodded thoughtfully. Harold has agreed to serve on our community advisory board during the transition. His foundation has extensive experience evaluating the viability of social enterprise initiatives. Exactly the skill set we need to create more objective assessment protocols. Victoria looked as though she might be ill. A community advisory board? But our established processes failed my grandson, Harold finished for her, and from what Alexander tells me, many others as well. He surveyed the 3 bank offices with the dispassionate assessment of someone who had evaluated talent for decades. Young lady, when I started in business 50 years ago, I couldn't afford designer suits either. Judging someone's potential by their appearance isn't just cruel, it's bad business. Emma stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Blackwood, Harold, would your grandson be willing to speak with our staff? I think his perspective could be valuable as we redesign our approach to evaluating new ventures. Harold's severe expression softened. He'd be delighted. Jason has always believed in giving back. It's why his clinic will offer services on a sliding scale. He glanced at Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan. Unlike some, he understands that true worth isn't measured by a price tag. Olivia, who had been observing silently, opened her tablet. Now that Mr. Blackwood is here, we should discuss specific personnel changes. She looked directly at Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan. The 3 of you have choices to make. Not about whether things will change, that's non-negotiable, but about whether you'll be part of that change. Alex resumed his seat, gesturing for Harold to join them. Here's the situation. We're restructuring Meridian's leadership. Thomas, your position as branch manager is being eliminated. The new organizational structure will have co-directors, one focusing on operations, the other on community engagement. Thomas's face fell. I see. So I'm being terminated after all. Not necessarily, Emma interjected. We're offering you the opportunity to apply for the operations role. Your institutional knowledge would be valuable if it's paired with a genuine commitment to our new direction. Victoria leaned forward. And what about my position? Loan officer roles are being reconfigured, Olivia explained clinically. The new structure will include community investment advisors, who work with both traditional and non-traditional applicants. Your technical skills are strong, Ms. Bennett, but your approach to client assessment requires significant adjustment. Victoria swallowed hard. You're asking me to completely change how I evaluate loan applications. No, Emma corrected gently. We're asking you to expand your definition of worthiness beyond appearances and social signals, to see potential, where you previously saw only risk. Aidan, ever the strategist, had been calculating his options throughout the conversation. And if we choose not to accept these new positions, Alex met his gaze directly, then you'll receive standard severance packages and letters of reference acknowledging your technical competencies. But be aware that Morgan Innovations is acquiring 3 other financial institutions in New England over the next year. The banking community in this region is about to undergo significant transformation. The threat was subtle but clear: adapt or become obsolete. Harold Blackwood, who had been watching the exchange with interest, suddenly chuckled. You know, in my day, we called this shape up or ship out. The terminology has become more corporate, but the principle remains the same. Victoria looked between Emma and Alex, her carefully constructed worldview visibly crumbling. Why are you even offering us another chance? After yesterday, after everything, why not just fire us all? It was Emma who answered, her voice soft but unwavering. Because terminating you would be easy, but it wouldn't create change. The next bank you worked at would have the same problems, and you'd continue the same patterns. She leaned forward, meeting Victoria's eyes directly. You're not bad people. You've just been working in a system that rewards certain types of judgments. We're changing that system and offering you the chance to change with it. Thomas stared at the table, conflict evident in his expression. And if we try and fail, if we can't adapt to this new philosophy, then you'll leave knowing. You made an honest attempt, Alex replied simply, but I suspect you're all more capable of growth than you realize. A heavy silence fell over the conference room as the 3 bank officers absorbed the magnitude of what was being offered. Not just continued employment, but a chance at redemption. Victoria was the first to break the silence. The community program you mentioned, working with literacy volunteers, when would that start? Next week, Emma answered, surprise and cautious hope in her expression. We have a reading event at the Webster Street Community Center on Tuesday. Victoria nodded slowly, a complexity of emotions crossing her face. I'll need to reschedule some meetings. Olivia made a note on her tablet, her expression revealing nothing. Consider it done. Harold Blackwood stood, buttoning his impeccable suit jacket. Well, this has been illuminating. Alexander, I look forward to seeing the changes here. Too long the financial world has operated on appearances rather than substance. He nodded respectfully to Emma. Mrs. Morgan, a genuine pleasure. Perhaps you'd consider addressing the Blackwood Foundation board about your literacy initiative. We're always looking for worthy projects. I'd be honored, Emma replied, rising to shake his hand again. Excellent. My assistant will contact you. With a final appraising look at the 3 subdued bank officers, Harold departed, leaving a contemplative silence in his wake. Alex turned back to Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan. You have until Friday to decide. In the meantime, consider yourselves on paid leave. Use the time to reflect on whether you want to be part of what Meridian is becoming. As they gathered their belongings in stunned silence, Emma added a final thought. Sometimes the most valuable growth comes from the moments that challenge our deepest assumptions about ourselves and others. This could be such a moment if you're willing to embrace it. The 3 filed out without further comment, each lost in their own thoughts about futures suddenly turned uncertain. When they had gone, Olivia looked at Emma with newfound respect. "You're more forgiving than I would be," she observed. "After the way they treated you, I expected you to want them gone." Emma shook her head. "Firing them wouldn't solve the real problem. The banking culture that values appearance over substance, prestige over potential, that's what needs to change." Alex took her hand across the table, his expression a mixture of pride and love. "And that's exactly why you're the perfect person to help lead that change. You see people for who they can become, not just who they are in their worst moments." Olivia stood, gathering her materials with brisk efficiency. "Well, the restructuring plan is ready whenever you are. I've identified several promising internal candidates for the Community Engagement Director position, including that teller, Zoe Parker. Her personnel file shows consistent community volunteer work despite her unfortunate behavior yesterday." "People are complicated," Emma observed. "Sometimes the same person who laughs at someone to fit in might genuinely care about helping others when given the opportunity." Olivia's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps, though I still recommend a probationary period for all transitioning staff." "Agreed," Alex nodded. "Trust is earned, especially after it's been broken." As Olivia departed to coordinate the day's remaining transition meetings, Alex and Emma found themselves alone in the glass-walled conference room. Through the transparent barriers, they could see the bank's employees returning to their stations, conversations hushed but intense as they processed the morning's revelations. "You know," Emma said thoughtfully, "when I called you yesterday, I wasn't expecting you to buy the bank." Alex's lips quirked in a small smile. "Would a modest donation to your literacy program have been sufficient?" She laughed softly. "Probably, but then Victoria might never have discovered that her version of value is remarkably limited." Alex studied his wife's face, still amazed after all these years by her capacity for seeing beyond surface injury to deeper possibilities. "You really believe they can change?" Emma watched as Victoria emerged from the ladies' room, her makeup freshly repaired, but her expression thoughtful rather than haughty as she crossed the lobby. "I believe everyone deserves the chance to try, including those who didn't offer me the same courtesy. That's why I love you," Alex said simply. "You see the best in people, even when they don't see it in themselves." "Not always," Emma admitted. "I had some rather uncharitable thoughts involving Victoria's perfect hair and a pair of scissors yesterday." Alex laughed, the sound drawing curious glances from employees still unaccustomed to genuine warmth within these marble walls. "Completely understandable. But you didn't act on it, which is more restraint than many would show." Emma gathered her portfolio, ready to move on to their next meeting. "The real test will come next Tuesday at the community center. I'm curious to see if any of them actually show up." "If they do," Alex replied, rising to join her, "it will be because you offered them something more valuable than job security." "Nah, what's that?" "The chance to become better than they were yesterday." He held the door for her as they exited the conference room. "A chance everyone deserves, but not everyone receives." As they crossed the lobby toward the exit bank, employees nodded respectfully, their gazes following the couple with newfound understanding. Emma Lawson Morgan might not wear designer labels or drive a luxury car, but her quiet authority and compassionate strength had transformed their workplace. In less than 24 hours, the simple woman who'd been humiliated on these marble floors had returned not for revenge, but for reform, and in doing so, revealed a power greater than wealth or position, the power to see potential where others saw only appearances. The Webster Street Community Center stood in stark contrast to Meridian Trust's imposing marble edifice. Its brick walls were weathered but well-maintained, decorated with colorful murals painted by local children. Inside, The former factory space had been transformed into a vibrant hub of activity, with separate areas for after-school programs, adult education classes, and community gatherings. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the main room was arranged with reading circles, small clusters of chairs and cushions surrounding low tables stacked with books for various reading levels. Emma moved efficiently between stations, adjusting book selections and checking the name tags prepared for each volunteer. Her casual outfit, jeans, sneakers, and a simple blue blouse allowed her to kneel beside the children's cushions and reach high shelves with equal ease. She consulted her clipboard, confirming that everything was ready for the afternoon's reading program, which paired adult volunteers with children who needed extra support developing literacy skills. "Ms. Emma!" A small voice called from the entrance as 10-year-old Darius burst through the doors, his backpack bouncing against his narrow shoulders. "Did you bring the dragon book? You promised." Emma's face lit up as she set down her clipboard to give the boy her full attention. "I did indeed. Third installment in the series as promised." She reached into a nearby box and produced a colorful hardcover. "You finished the second one already?" Darius nodded vigorously, his eyes wide with excitement. "Read it twice. The fire maze part was the best." "Then you're going to love this one," Emma assured him, handing over the book with ceremonial gravity. "The Dragon Academy has its first tournament." The boy clutched the book to his chest reverently before racing off to show his friends who were beginning to arrive. Emma watched him go with quiet satisfaction. 2 months ago, Darius had been reading 2 grade levels behind, his confidence shattered by struggles that no one had taken time to address properly. Now, he devoured books faster than she could supply them. The center's director, Gabriela Morales, approached with a look of barely contained amusement. "So, should I expect our usual volunteers today, or will we be hosting banking executives instead?" Emma smiled. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I honestly don't know if any of them will show up." It had been 5 days since the confrontation at Meridian Trust. All 3 bank officers, Victoria, Thomas, and Aidan, had submitted requests to remain with the bank under its new structure, but Emma had no way of knowing whether their interest was genuine or merely self-preservation. Today would be the first test. "Well, we have enough regular volunteers to cover if they don't show," Gabriela reassured her. "Though I admit, I'm curious to see how Ms. Designer Handbag handles sounding out words with a squirmy 7-year-old. Emma was about to respond when the center's doors swung open. Victoria Bennett stood in the entrance, looking profoundly out of place. She'd made concessions to the setting, trading her usual stilettos for modest heels and wearing a simple black dress rather than her customary power suit. But her pearls and perfect blowout still screamed banker rather than volunteer. She hesitated, visibly uncertain, until Emma approached with a welcoming smile. "Victoria, I'm glad you came." Victoria's eyes darted around the room, taking in the modest surroundings and the children beginning to claim their favorite cushions. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted, a rare vulnerability in her voice. "I'm not sure I'll be any good with children." "Most of our first-time volunteers feel that way," Emma assured her, guiding Victoria toward the volunteer check-in table. "You'll be partnered with one of our experienced mentors today. Just observe and assist where you can." As Emma handed Victoria a name tag, the doors opened again. Thomas Wilson entered, looking surprisingly casual in khakis and a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves. He was followed, to Emma's genuine surprise, by Aidan Clark, who had traded his bespoke suit for jeans and a polo shirt. Both men looked as uncomfortable as Victoria, but they had shown up, a first step that Emma hadn't been entirely confident they would take. "Gentlemen," she greeted them with professional warmth, "welcome to Open Page. We're just getting set up for today's session. Thomas nodded stiffly. Ms. Chen was very specific about attendance being mandatory. Emma tilted her head slightly. Mandatory participation wouldn't benefit anyone, especially the children. If you'd rather not be here, you're free to leave. A complicated series of emotions crossed Thomas's face. No, I'm here now. Might as well see what this is all about. Aidan, ever the pragmatist, simply asked, "What do you need us to do?" Emma directed them to the volunteer coordinator, a retired teacher who expertly assessed their nervous energy and assigned them to appropriate stations. Victoria was paired with Elena, a longtime volunteer who worked with beginning readers. Thomas was stationed at the chapter book table with middle schoolers who needed help with comprehension. Aidan was given the seemingly simple but critically important task of helping children find just right books, selections that would challenge without frustrating them. As the children arrived, a diverse group ranging from 6 to 14 years old, many from Boston's most underserved neighborhoods, Emma circulated through the room, observing the interactions with keen interest. The regular volunteers fell easily into familiar patterns, greeting returning children by name and welcoming newcomers with practiced warmth. The bank officers, by contrast, moved with the hesitant caution of people in unfamiliar territory. Victoria sat ramrod straight beside Elena, watching with barely concealed anxiety as a small girl named Lily selected a picture book from the display. Thomas attempted stilted conversation with 2 middle school boys who responded with monosyllabic wariness. Aidan stood near the bookshelves, hands in his pockets, clearly unsure how to approach the children, browsing the selections. Emma was considering intervention when Darius, her enthusiastic dragon book fan, approached Aidan with surprising confidence. "Are you new?" the boy asked bluntly. "I haven't seen you here before." Aidan blinked, momentarily thrown by the direct address. "Yes, first day." Darius nodded sagely. "I can tell. You look scared." A startled laugh escaped Aidan. "Do I?" "Uh-huh, but that's okay. I was scared my first time too," Darius confided. "Ms. Emma says everyone feels weird sometimes in new places." He held up his dragon book. "Do you know any other books like this one? With magic and adventures, but not too many hard words?" Emma watched from across the room as something shifted in Aidan's expression. A subtle softening, a momentary connection with the child's straightforward request. He knelt down to examine the book cover more closely. "I used to read a series like this when I was about your age," he said, his voice losing its professional edge. "About a kid who finds a secret door to another world. I think they might have it here." Together, they moved toward the fantasy section, Darius chattering enthusiastically about dragons, while Aidan listened with growing engagement. One small connection, Emma thought, but perhaps a beginning. Across the room, Victoria was having a more challenging introduction. Lily, the 6-year-old assigned to her reading group, regarded the perfectly coiffed banker with undisguised suspicion. "Your shoes are too fancy for sitting on the floor," Lily declared, pointing at Victoria's modest but still expensive heels. Elena, the experienced volunteer, smiled apologetically. "Our youngest readers do prefer floor cushions to chairs, more comfortable for the longer stories." Victoria glanced down at her carefully selected outfit with dismay. After a moment's hesitation, she slipped off her shoes and arranged herself carefully on a cushion beside the little girl. "Better." Lily considered this concession, then nodded gravely. "I guess. Can you do funny voices for the characters? Ms. Elena does the best bear voice." Victoria looked panicked. "I'm not sure I—" "Just try," Elena encouraged gently. "The children respond to enthusiasm more than perfection." As the session progressed, Emma continued her rounds, pausing occasionally to assist a struggling reader or redirect an energetic child. She couldn't help noticing the gradual transformation. occurring among her reluctant volunteers. Thomas, initially stiff and formal, was now leaning forward with genuine interest as a 12-year-old boy explained the plot of his favorite science fiction series. Victoria had abandoned all concern for her perfect appearance and was sprawled on a cushion, reading with surprisingly theatrical voices that had Lily giggling delightedly. Most remarkable was Aidan, who had somehow accumulated a small group of fantasy enthusiasts around him. He was animatedly describing a book from his childhood, his usual calculating demeanor replaced by unexpected enthusiasm. The sword glows. It blew whenever goblins are nearby, he explained to his rapt audience, and the main character has to solve riddles to find the hidden door. Can we get that book? Darius asked eagerly. Aidan looked up, catching Emma's eye across the room. I'm not sure if it's available here, but perhaps we could acquire it? The question held a tentative olive branch, his first initiated contribution. Emma smiled. I think that could be arranged. We're always looking to expand our fantasy section. By the end of the 2-hour session, the atmosphere had transformed from stilted awkwardness to genuine engagement. As the children departed with newly borrowed books and reading logs, the bank officers helped straighten the reading areas with the weary satisfaction of people who had unexpectedly exerted themselves in unfamiliar but rewarding ways. When the last child had left, Emma gathered the volunteers for a quick debriefing. Thank you all for your efforts today. For our new volunteers, thoughts on your first experience? There was a momentary silence before Thomas spoke up. It was not what I expected. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that made him seem younger, less rigid. Jason, the boy I was working with, his reading skills are exceptional, but he's failing language arts because he can't afford the required books for class and is too embarrassed to tell his teacher. Emma nodded. That's unfortunately common. Part of our program involves working with schools to address those barriers. Victoria had been unusually quiet, her perfect makeup slightly smudged from an afternoon spent at child level. Lily told me she doesn't have any books at home. She said finally, not a single one. I can't even imagine that. Many of our families are focused on immediate needs, food, housing, healthcare, Gabriella explained. Books become a luxury. Aidan, who had been listening intently, suddenly asked, what's your budget for new acquisitions for the collection here? Emma named a figure that made him blink in surprise. That's minimal. How do you maintain quality with those constraints? Carefully, Emma replied simply. We stretch every dollar, accept quality donations, and prioritize based on demonstrated needs. The three bank officers exchanged glances, a wordless communication passing between them. Victoria cleared her throat. I might have some connections with publishers through our corporate client list. Perhaps some donated materials could be arranged. Our marketing department has an underutilized community engagement budget, Thomas added thoughtfully. It's meant for sponsorships that generate goodwill. This seems like a natural fit, Aidan nodded. And the blind loan review process we're implementing could be adapted to include community literacy initiatives as a favorable factor in business applications. Emma listened to this unexpected brainstorming with carefully concealed amazement. Whether motivated by genuine conversion or strategic adaptation, the bank officers were applying their professional expertise to problems they wouldn't have even recognized a week ago. When they finally departed, Gabriella approached Emma with raised eyebrows. Well, that was unexpected. Especially Mr. Slick Hair actually getting down on the floor to demonstrate a sword fight from some fantasy novel. Emma smiled. People can surprise you when given the chance. Your billionaire husband buying their bank was quite the chance, Gabriella observed dryly. The circumstances were unusual, Emma acknowledged, but the principle isn't. People rise or fall to the expectations placed on them. Today, we expected them to connect with children who need support, and they did. That evening, as Emma recounted the day's events to Alex over dinner in their Cambridge apartment, her preference over his downtown penthouse, she found herself genuinely impressed by the bank officer's participation. Victoria actually volunteered to return next week, she explained, still somewhat amazed. Said she wants to continue working with Lily specifically. Alex listened thoughtfully, twirling pasta on his fork. One positive experience doesn't transform someone overnight. Of course not, Emma agreed, but it's a start. They saw real people affected by the very policies they've been implementing. That kind of direct connection can shift perspectives in ways that policy memos never will. Alex reached across the table to take her hand. You see the best in people, even when they've shown you their worst. It's remarkable. Not always, Emma admitted. I still have moments of doubt about their sincerity. But today, watching Aiden get genuinely excited about helping Darius find the right book, it felt real. And the bank restructuring? Any second thoughts about taking on the community engagement director role? Emma considered the question seriously. When Alex had first proposed she co-lead Meridian's transformation, she'd been hesitant, concerned about conflicts with her non-profit work. But increasingly, she saw the potential for meaningful integration between the two. I think it's the right move, she said finally. The financial industry needs more voices advocating for genuine community investment. And honestly, after seeing those three today, I'm more convinced than ever that people can change when systems allow them to. 3 months later, Meridian Trust had undergone a transformation that extended far beyond new leadership and policies. The physical space itself had been redesigned, the intimidating marble still present, but softened by community art installations and a redesigned waiting area featuring a children's reading nook stocked with books from the Open Page initiative. The blind loan review process had resulted in approval rates that more accurately reflected applicants' financial qualifications rather than their appearance or connections. A new microloan program, championed unexpectedly by Thomas in his new operations role, had already helped launch 15 small businesses in underserved neighborhoods. Most surprising to Emma was the genuine evolution she witnessed in the three bankers who had once humiliated her. Victoria had been hesitant about accepting the restructured loan officer position, but her expertise combined with her new perspective had made her surprisingly effective at identifying viable community investments. She'd maintained her weekly volunteer commitment at the reading program, where Lily now greeted her with enthusiastic hugs. Thomas had thrown himself into operational reforms with the zeal of a convert, applying his considerable organizational talents to streamlining processes that had previously disadvantaged non-traditional applicants. And Aiden, after some initial resistance, had discovered an unexpected talent for translating complex financial concepts into accessible guidance for first-time business owners. Emma stood in the center of Meridian's transformed lobby, watching as Victoria patiently explained loan options to a young woman in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt who wanted to expand her home bakery business. There was no condescension in Victoria's manner, no dismissive glances at the woman's simple attire, just focused attention on the business plan spread between them. Alex joined her, following her gaze. Still surprised, Emma smiled. Every day, though I shouldn't be, people want to do meaningful work. They just need systems that reward the right things. Speaking of rewards, Alex said, Harold Blackwood, you called this morning. The Foundation Board unanimously approved funding for your mobile library expansion. Full amount, no strings attached. Emma turned to him with delight. That's wonderful. We can launch the 3 new routes by summer. There's more, Alex continued. Jason Blackwood wants to partner with Open Page to bring regular reading programs to the neighborhoods his mobile veterinary clinic serves. Apparently, the waiting room is the perfect place for kids to practice reading while their pets are being examined. Emma laughed. That's brilliant, actually. I'll call him this afternoon. They walked together through the bank toward the exit, passing Aidan's office, where he was conducting a workshop for small business owners on financial planning. Through the glass walls, Emma could see Darius's mother among the participants, taking careful notes as she worked to expand the catering business she'd started from her kitchen. Outside on the steps of what had once been an intimidating institution, Emma paused to look back at the building that had been the site of her humiliation just months ago. The same marble column stood proud against the Boston skyline, but now a new sign hung beside the traditional Meridian Trust logo, Community Partners in Prosperity. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I applied for that loan, all I wanted was enough funding to expand our literacy program to a few more neighborhoods." Alex smiled. "And now we're changing how an entire financial institution approaches community investment. The funding is important, but the shift in perspective, that's the real transformation." As they descended the steps, Emma nodded to a security guard who held the door for a woman entering the bank. The woman clutched a worn portfolio similar to the one Emma had carried on that rainy day months ago. But unlike Emma's experience, this woman was greeted immediately by a welcoming staff member who led her to a comfortable seating area to wait for her appointment. "One bank at a time," Alex said, following her gaze. "Then one industry." Emma smiled. "Exactly. Change happens in unexpected ways. Sometimes it takes a coffee stain to start a revolution." They walked hand in hand toward their waiting car, leaving behind an institution transformed not by wealth or power alone, but by the simple, radical idea that everyone deserves to be seen for their potential rather than their appearance. The simple woman who had once been humiliated on those marble floors had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had created space for others to find theirs as well. And in the end, that was a far more satisfying victory than mere revenge could ever provide. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.